culture always feels better to senior leaders. Like whatever we're experiencing, whatever is going on, it always is better than the reality for the rest of the team. And so it takes a great deal of vulnerability. I think like one of the first chapters in the book is called Get Honest, because we have to work hard to get an honest assessment of what's really true. Like, and there's some good things too. So I don't want to say it's all bad, but the experience for the rest of the team, it takes a lot of willingness to be vulnerable enough to hear the truth about the team's experience. And if we're willing to do that, because we've got to get honest about where we are in order to help define a better future for what we hope for.
Well, what is up, crew? It's Adam. You're listening to The Conversation. Today is episode 284, which I can't believe. And today we are talking all about the importance of self-leadership and leading ourselves. We're also talking about culture and the fact that every team, business, church, organization has a culture, but how can you have a good, healthy culture? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Friends, wherever you are, just know I'm so grateful, honored, humbled that you're listening in. I do these conversations every single week for each of you, the listeners. But before we go any further, I need, and more than that, I want to give a huge shout out to our partners. These are partners that I know and trust and have known for years, and that's why I want you to know about them as well. Our first partner is Vern Eide Motorcars. Vern Eide Mitsubishi is a growing employee-owned company that strives to deliver dreams and transform lives, and their goal is excellence in everything that they do. Well, as a customer who's purchased my last 3 vehicles from Vern Eide, I can tell you they deliver. Honestly, I'm to the point now where if someone brings up they're looking for a car, I'm like, hey, Vern Eide. Someone mentions a boat, I'm like, Vern Eide. Tractor, Vern Eide. Snowmobile, Vern Eide. Whether you're looking for an Outlander like I drive, whether you're looking for an Acura, a Honda, a Chevy, GMC, again, a boat, tractor, snowmobile, you name the make and type of vehicle, and Vern Eide most likely sells it. And no matter where you live, they will ship it to you. Go visit verneide.com. Our second partner is First Interstate Bank. I've been doing my own personal banking with First Interstate since 2007. That's a long, again, these are not just random partners. I know First Interstate very, very well. Their mission is to help people and their money work better together. They have over 300 locations across 14 different states, from Arizona to Colorado, Washington State to the great state of South Dakota. For more information, to find a location near you, visit firstinterstatebank.com. Again, firstinterstatebank.com. Well, today I had the honor of being joined by Jenni Catron, and Jenni is a leadership coach. She's an author. She's a speaker with a passion to cultivate healthy leaders and cultures with the goal of having thriving organizations. And friends, I just love this conversation, and why I loved it is because I was deeply challenged by what Jenni had to share. Right out of the gate, Jenni just jumped right into it, and she shares that often we as the leaders are the hardest people on our teams to lead. Often you'll hear leaders complain about their teams, but Jenni's like, no, actually, typically the hardest person to lead in a company or business, church, is the leader themselves. And so Jenni and I, we talk about how to lead ourselves in a healthy way. We talk about how to know, is the culture of our family, our business, our church, is it healthy or not? Is it good or bad? Not according to you as the leader, but according to your team. Jenni's like, often the leader has a very skewed version of what their culture really is like. Don't ask them, ask their teams. We talk about that. And if we want to change our culture, whether we're in charge or not, how do we change our culture for good? And so if you are a leader in any way, shape, or form, this conversation's priceless. I've already told several of my friends about this episode and that they need to listen to it. On that note, as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation, friends. So Jenni, you're the CEO, founder of the Foresight Group, where you work with individuals, teams on leadership, culture, strategy. Before we kind of hop into things, just for someone listening, if you want to give the Cliff Notes version of your personal kind of leadership journey, just kind of in a nutshell. This is kind of a little bit of who I am, background-wise, that.
Yeah. I started my career in the music business in Nashville, Tennessee. So that was my dream job since I was a 13-year-old kid. I wanted to work in the music business, not a performer on the business side, because I knew that I wasn't talented enough for the performance side. So I had just an amazing first decade of my career working with some Christian artists back in the 90s and early 2000s. And then I went on staff at the church my husband and I helped plant. So there's a church we were a part of in Nashville. Never dreamed I'd be in ministry staff, found myself God just giving me this unexpected pivot into ministry, and just had an amazing opportunity to be a part of a great church for another decade or so.
Yeah.
And then I started the Foresight Group almost, 8.5 years ago. And it was really a heart to say, I want to serve more leaders and teams. I deeply believe that leaders need to be healthy and thriving. Their teams need to be unified, aligned, thriving, and on mission to help us accomplish the work that we need to do. And so that's what I'm doing now. And it's absolutely a blast.
That's great. Thanks for that background. Okay, so leadership. Let's talk some of that specifically first. Someone recently asked me, Adam, what's your current greatest challenge leadership-wise? And I said back, leading myself. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, genuinely.
100% for me.
It's just keeping this Yahoo in the place that I should be and how to best lead. So one of your focuses is self-leadership so that we can lead others well. Why is self-leadership a focus, and why is it so important? Just to kind of I asked the softball question.
Yeah, as the softball. Well, honestly, it goes back to my music business days. And I was that driven, ambitious bulldozer young leader who was ready to take over the world. And I had a leader say to me, Jenni, if you want to work in a factory, go work with widgets. Or if you want to work with widgets, go work in a factory. But if you want to work with people, you've got to learn to love them, to lead them. It was one of the most pivotal conversations I've ever had, Adam. It sounds like such a simple conversation, but it was this recognition that I had this complete misunderstanding of leadership. I thought it was about power and position. Now, I wouldn't have used those words, but I thought it was about climbing the ladder and doing all the big things that I aspired to do. And the reality was, leadership is not about you, it's about others. But the irony of it is that we have to lead ourselves well in order to lead others better. And that conversation with that leader, who somebody to this day, still a mentor, friend in my life and story, it catalyzed this commitment to, I needed to understand what leadership looked like. And it started with understanding how to lead me. And so I think because it was so foundational to me is why it became kind of the anchor point for all the work that I do. I just so deeply believe it. And as soon as you asked the question and you were saying your answer was self-leadership, I was internally I was anticipating maybe that's what you were going to ask me. And I was like, yeah, it's self-leadership. And then you say, I'm like, because it is. I'm the hardest person to lead. I'm a train wreck. I'm a mess. But if I'm not in a healthy place, if I'm not operating from a good place, that trickles out, it spills out onto everybody around me. And so it's just such a deep core conviction for me.
Oh, and really quick for me, so I got the 3, I'm driven, I'm passionate. And then when I started Embrace when I was 24, and really the only leadership I reported to was kind of an interesting thing. I'm trying to really honor that. It's years ago. Sure. Any phone call from them was never a positive thing. Right. So it was, I cared for myself.
Yeah. You didn't have anybody coaching or leading you.
So and that's not a cop-out answer, but I just literally, anytime I got a phone call or email from leadership, it was a negative thing. So I feel like I've always been great at caring for everyone except my team. And for my team, early on specifically, I treated everybody like widgets. When it comes to self-leadership, maybe top issues that you see in leaders. Is there one or two things that you're like, gosh, when it comes to self-leadership, here are the couple of things that you would identify? Or even what are they and how can we see them in ourselves? Because this is so hard to see.
It's so hard to see. I think I think fear is a big one for so many leaders, but it will mask itself as sometimes we'll see what we perceive as pride or arrogance in a leader, but that's often coming from some type of fear that they have, right? And so again, I could just say me. You might perceive me as confident and proud and arrogant because I'm, just doing what I do, but it oftentimes is coming from a deep fear, a fear of failure, a fear of not meeting expectations, whatever that might be. And so, that awareness of, I think a lot of times, especially for leaders, when we feel some kind of fear, we just react and overcompensate for it instead of being willing to look at it and go, okay, what am I afraid of? What do I not want to face? So maybe you could say it's fear or it's avoidance. Maybe it's a little bit of both of those. But I think the unwillingness to look at what am I afraid of or what am I running from are really good questions to pause and ask. And so kind of hand in hand with that too is busyness, that leaders keep ourselves busy because we feel a sense of accomplishment and purpose and importance from staying busy. And the busyness distracts us from what's really going on. How do I really feel? Again, what am I trying to avoid? And so for me, I know that anytime I feel like I'm overcompensating or I'm just keeping myself too busy, those are usually caution flags for me to say, okay, am I leading myself well? Right? Is the calendar so full there's no margin for space to think, dream, pray, get bored? That ability to actually sit in the quiet with yourself to know what's going on with me. So those are a couple of things. You might have reactions to those.
Yeah. What would you say is an issue? I'm kind of generalizing. A lot of leaders are 3s or 8s. What would you see as a top issue for like self-leading and like an 8? Is there anything that comes to mind there? Like as far as like what you would say is maybe an issue that keeps coming up. And then again, if a person is listening right now and they are just very, very blind to their need for self-leadership, how can we see that in ourselves? Because everybody has blind spots.
Yeah, for sure. I think to answer the question about Enneagram 8s, I think if you're an 8, paying attention to your energy level, in that 8s tend to, 8s can tend to be a bit aggressive. And the more aggressive you're getting, the more urgency, maybe a little bit of like anger, frustration, the more those things are coming out, the more that I would go, okay, hey, heads up. What is that? What's going on there?
Enneagram 8s under the surface are angry even while they're sleeping. But keep going there.
That's right. That's right. They're always angry. They're like, what are you talking about?
They're angry. They're just angry people.
But I think when you notice it kind of going to another gear, you're like, you know what? Okay, I'm a little bit, know, and that's true for all of us. Whatever our thing is, like when it's going up a notch, when our RPMs are revving a little high, like you're like, hey, that's a good caution flag. And then remind me your second question.
Yeah, just how do we see our blind spots? Because I look back and there was a season where I had 5 different people tell me the same thing, and I blew it off. I was like, I wouldn't verbalize this, but gosh, you must be lazy. Like I'm just driven. I'm passionate about goals, and you obviously aren't. Yeah. I just look back, and for me, it took really a hard, horrible season leadership wise to wake me up. I kind of just blew through all the
warning.
Yeah. The road flares.
Yeah. Adam, I'm a little like, my first reaction to that is that I think we become self-aware when we're finally willing to do it. Right? When we finally get to a little bit of a breaking point. So, you talked about the hard season of leadership for you. One of the moments for me, again, this is like, I always feel like these kind of issues are like hurdles. You cross one and then you're going to come to another one and you're going to have to do it again. Yes. But we get a little more equipped to eclipse the hurdle a little faster. But it was, it was that conversation with that leader who said, Jenni, you've got to love people to lead them. That was a big, like, eye-opening moment for me of going, wait, like, what about how I've been approaching everything I do is not working? So I think most leaders that have kind of a good self-aware moment, like kind of that catalytic moment, there's some kind of forcing event, that just pushes you to wake up to it. I do think if a leader's willing to be humble and vulnerable, and maybe, inviting feedback, inviting people to speak in before it gets to a point where they feel like they have to speak in, So my pastor that I work with here at home, I don't think he ends a meeting with me without asking, do you have any feedback for me? How do you feel about this conversation I just had? Anything you would coach me on? And so, yeah, it's actually really refreshing, Adam.
Yeah.
I'm like, and he's a younger leader, and he has such a posture of wanting to get feedback and to receive feedback, and genuinely listen, because I think we can also give lip service to those kind of things, but genuinely wants to be coached and given feedback and to hear how the team is experiencing things.
I just had to ask, because that you just hit what I wanted to hit. It's one thing to say it, kind of dissecting. What has he done that you actually feel like you can give him the real answer? Because I think so often, hey, Jenni, what do you feel? And you're like, you can't handle. And you really don't want it. You just are saying that because that's you read a leadership book 10 years ago. What would you say that this leader's done that you feel like you could be honest? Is there anything that you're like could put your finger on that actually?
That's a great question. It's definitely like his posture, in that it's not just in the one-on-one meetings, it's in our team meetings. It's consistent. It's not just on the good days. It's also on, maybe we've had a hard meeting or a tough conversation, and he's inviting it in those moments too. And so it's the consistency of gold. Requesting it.
Yeah. That's gold. I think that's the gold right there on that. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Culture. We need to get to culture. You have a book coming out, Culture Matters. It took me 15 years to realize how important culture is. Sad but true. As leaders, how can we know if our culture is good or bad? And I'll let you start there.
Yeah, well, and I mean, our previous conversation almost answers this, right? In that it's organizational self-awareness, right? It is the recognition, so if we want to know how our culture is, we've got to be vulnerable enough to ask, what's the experience like for our team? Whoa. Because the problem for us as leaders is that the culture we're experiencing, we're okay with, because we have a lot of control over it. So I really would love to hear. I love your comment about took you 15 years to experience the importance of it. I want to come back to that. But I think what we're experiencing, we're shaping. And so culture always feels better to senior leaders. Like whatever we're experiencing, whatever is going on, it always is better than the reality for the rest of the team. And so it takes a great deal of vulnerability. I think like one of the first chapters in the book is called Get Honest, because we have to work hard to get an honest assessment of what's really true. And there's some good things too. So I don't want to say it's all bad, but the experience for the rest of the team, it takes a lot of willingness to be vulnerable enough to hear the truth about the team's experience. And if we're willing to do that, because we've got to get honest about where we are in order to help define a better future for what we hope for.
That's good. So really, the only way to kind of find out, is there anything else like, how do I know? Ask people is probably the best way to do it. Is there any specific way that we should ask that's helpful, that you're not going to get just lip service? Again, I'm just picturing the person who, myself, not that long ago, just being like, yeah, whatever. Any pro tips there on how to actually get the honesty?
Yeah. It is hard. And the longer you've gone without a mechanism for consistent feedback around employee experience, the harder it is to start. So there, it's just the nature of it. We do, when we're working with organizations on their culture, we'll do an assessment with their team. So we'll do a deep dive, and we're all pretty familiar with different tools for assessment. One of the fascinating pieces for me is we do them anonymously, and there's mixed reviews about whether surveys should be anonymous or not. I think an anonymous survey as part of your process is good, because it at least gives a place where you can at least get the feedback. Now, you might not know who did it, and we all want to know who said it because we feel like then we can address it. So I think for some of us control freaks, it's probably better that we don't know where it's coming from directly. We just need to get the info so we can start taking action. But I think an anonymous survey that's comprehensive, it gives a place for feedback on lots of different points of the organizational culture, facilitated by a third party, becomes really powerful.
It's great.
And here's what's fascinating, Adam. When we will do this work with organizations, that I cannot tell you, probably 90% of the time, we will send the survey. We've communicated in advance. It's anonymous. I would bet you 90% of the time, we will get team members who respond to us and say, is it really anonymous?
Ugh.
Is it really? And we immediately know there's a level of fear in the culture as to whether they can be honest about the reality.
Wow.
Which is in and of itself telling. And again, most of these organizations, these are not, hyper toxic cultures, but team members, they want to be respectful of their leaders. They want to believe the best about their organization. They don't want to disappoint their leaders by maybe sharing what's not so great right now.
Yep.
And so there's a fear of, can I really say this? Is it really okay if I say this? Now, if it's a super toxic culture, they're afraid of retribution if they say something that isn't going to be liked. But by and large, there's just a little bit of a fear of, do they really want to know? And will they do anything about it? And so again, such a super vulnerable place for us as leaders to say, I really want to know. I really care. This really matters. And I'm willing to get honest about what's true and not excuse it away. Because it's really, again, I'm pointing at myself in all of this. I've been working on this work for over 20 years, in the organizations I've been a part of. And I can't tell you the number of times that I wanted to dismiss it or excuse it away when in fact there was something I needed to pay attention to. And so again, it comes back to us leading ourselves well so we can get honest feedback about what's going on in the culture. So surveying is the starting point. We can do focus groups. I talk about in the book assembling a culture team that starts to help you really mine for what's going on in the culture, and then working together to move towards what do we aspire to, what do we hope for, and how do we build that?
So good. You said a whole bunch of things in there that are really good. And I felt a little bit prickly in a good way that I could see people being like, I don't know if I want to listen to this anymore, which is maybe, if you're listening, which is maybe a sign that you need to hear it. Like if you just listened and that kind of bothered you, or you wanted to brush it off as whatever, I would just honestly, Holy Spirit might be challenging you in some ways. After this, I didn't even tell you this before we recorded, Jenni. I'm going in an hour to sit with a third party person who is going to share my 360 results with me.
Good for you. That's vulnerable.
And it was anonymous. Our whole strategy team, anybody on the entire staff. So all of our strategy team is going through it as well. So I got the 2-page report on it. And even I was like, okay, God, I think I'm growing a little bit, because not that long ago, it would not have been pretty. And it was really for me, even just reading the 2-page report that I got, I was like, Lord, thank you so much. But for me, when I look at culture, our all staff meeting this week was, we had 6 different team members share about how they personally do their devotional time. And the room was just electric.
Yeah.
We were laughing, we were crying.
It's awesome.
It was just beautiful. And I sat back and I was like, I can't believe I get to be a part of this team.
See, that's what we want for everybody.
For me, and you could just see like from I'm going to put this in quotes, bottom up, top down, you could just feel it. And for me, it took, like, just to give like credit where credit's due. I like Travis Fink, our executive pastor, Kylie Breams, our creative director, Travis Waltner, Brian Rock, like it's been them helping this Yahoo to self-lead. But more, not me, it's been really the team. Travis Fink, our executive pastor specifically, like I told him the other day, we got done and I'm like, all that fruit that you just felt in that room, yes, that's because of your leadership, not mine.
Good for you.
And good for you. I was like, I just got to like sit in it and it was just awesome. Okay, so get the book, Culture Matters, read that. There's different how-tos on how to like know, is it bad or is it good, your culture? So how do we actually create a culture our people buy into and want to be a part of? Is there specifics that you would say, so, okay, it's not good. Let's say our culture it's not toxic, but it's not great. How can we begin to change that?
Yeah. I love, Adam, I love that you shared that story from your team, first of all, because I think I also want leaders to hear, you mentioned at the beginning, the last bit of the conversation where it was like, ooh, that's a little prickly. Like, how do I feel about that? Here's the thing. I probably, if you rewound like 25 years ago and told me that this would be the thing I would be so passionate about, I would have laughed in your face because I was such an achievement, like make things happen. I thought I was going to be a CEO of a record company. Like that was the dream. And I really thought people were like, just, widgets in the grand machine of Jenni's dreams. Right. And the fact that God has changed my heart so significantly to say people are the point. Yes. Like what we're doing, people are the point. And the stewardship, one of the definitions of culture I use is the stewardship of people in pursuit of a mission, right? Like that's the heart of culture. It's not kumbaya. I think sometimes people hear culture stuff and they're like, oh, great, we got to do more staff fun days and perks and, and we don't have budget for that. And I'm like, no, those things can be a part of it. But the beauty of it is when you have a team that are highly engaged, deeply committed, on mission with you, sharing those, moments in staff meeting together, and everybody is in it. Like they feel it, they're committed. They're like, this is who we are. This is how we work together. Gosh, it's so incredibly rewarding. Like there's nothing better than working with a phenomenal team. Like nothing better. So to answer your question about how, here's something, we don't have time to go way deep into the framework, but here's something that I will tell you. Clarity is a chief indicator of the health of a culture.
Whoa.
So many times we think that culture is all about like, making sure everybody feels great and all the warm, fuzzy stuff. But actually as leaders, we build trust when we provide clarity. And the more clarity team members have, and I'm talking about things like our mission, our vision, our org structure, my role, my responsibilities, how we work together, what are the values that guide how we behave as a team, like clarity on all those like organizational stuff, all that organizational stuff, clarity in those things helps me as an employee know how to succeed. Right? I mean, you think about this, the more clarity I have around, okay, here's where we're going. Here's what we're called to. This is why we're doing it. This is my part. My role is mission critical. This is why I'm here. This is what I'm supposed to do. Here's the goals that I have. Here's my leaders giving me feedback on how I'm doing on those things and telling me, hey, you're doing great here. Hey, here's a place I could see some growth and let me get you some resources for that. So good management. The more clarity we provide, the more confidence I have in how I show up and how I contribute. And the more confidently I'm contributing, the more I'm engaging, the more I'm connecting, the more I'm feeling a sense of belonging, and ultimately the more fulfilled I am as a team member. And so there's a lot in there, but my next step for leaders would be to say, where is there confusion in your organization? Even on the simple things, mission, vision, structure. I can't tell you the number of leaders that over the last handful of years, we've adjusted, some of our structure and our strategy for what we're doing. But we've left it fuzzy. It feels clear to us, but it's not necessarily clear throughout the organization. And so we've got to where can I provide clarity that helps build trust and helps equip my team. That's a fantastic starting point for culture.
I feel weird saying that. I've never would have thought clarity is what you would start with. And yet, like, it's probably the number one thing that the team brings up is clarity. Like, can we get more clarity on that? And I would never have thought that would be the go-to.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, I'm just like, what? Is there any number two? Like, is there a number two thing that you would say? So clarity, what would be the second like chunk?
Yeah. So the second thing I would say is, there's a couple things. What I just rattled off a minute ago is based on what I call the culture hierarchy of needs. And so that's outlined in the book. I've got articles on it too. Great. But it's called the culture hierarchy of needs. What do employees need to fully engage? And that's where we talk about that clarity and trust relationship is in that hierarchy of needs. The next piece of the puzzle is what I call the employee journey grid, which is at every step of an employee's journey inside our organization, from interviewing and hiring and onboarding and weekly meetings and performance reviews and one-on-ones and, just all the things that you rhythmically do in your organization. How are you reinforcing who you are and how you work together? So that's my true definition of culture is who we are and how we work together to achieve our mission. Yep. So who we are is, what is the mission and vision here? Like, what is unique and distinct about our organization that we're called to accomplish? How do we do that together? And that's usually defined by values. What are the values that are core to how we operate together as a team? So then you want to say, how are those things showing up in all these regular rhythms of organizational life? Because the problem is a lot of us will go, oh, this is another big system we've got to create, another thing we've got to do. No, it's actually merging things you're already doing. You're already defining your mission and vision. I don't know a good organization that doesn't have some clarity around that. And likely you've done some work on values, although there's a lot of really good work you can do to even make those richer and more robust for your organization. I think you guys have done that work. Yep. And then, but then looking at what are we already doing? I don't need you to create a whole nother system or a whole nother thing. I need you to say, what are we already doing organizationally in these regular rhythms of how our employees engage? And then how do we just make sure we are reinforcing the best of who we are and how we work together? How are those things showing up with regularity so that we're just reminding people every day of who we are, what we do, why we do it, and they know this is what we look like at our best. So that's another good litmus test for culture is this is what we look like at our best, and how do we do more of that?
Can you just give one example of what that would look like in an organization to kind of bring those things together and not feel like this whole new thing?
Yeah. And because I realize I'm giving just a whole lot in one.
That was so good.
So thinking about your weekly staff meeting, having a rhythm in your weekly staff meeting, and I know a lot of people do this, but I've got a team that I'm working with right now, and for the next 6 months in their all staff meeting, they're reviewing one of their staff values per month. But they're doing some fun things with it. They're getting different team members to present it, and they're doing shout outs and celebrations of team members that reflect those values. And again, I know that's not terribly unusual, but what we do is we do it once and then we don't do it again.
That's good.
You want to find a way to consistently do that and find new energy around it, new ways to do it. I've got another team that they have a brag board in their office space, where when somebody sees somebody else just reflecting the best of who they are, they just write a little note and they put it up on the brag board. And who doesn't want to see their name up on the board? Like, I've been in their offices and I'll find my name on the board and I'm like, made my day, right? So it's simple things done consistently that help reinforce who we want to be.
It's great. Okay, so last question. I'm not the boss. I'm just a part of the team.
Yeah.
What I want to change. I feel like I'm supposed to stay where I'm at, but my gosh, I just wish things could get better culture wise. How do I, is it kind of maybe think about switching where you're at? Like what would be your advice for a person who's like, I feel like this is where I want to be. I just wish it was better. And I'm kind of just frustrated.
Fair. And there's a lot of that. I'm glad you brought that question up, Adam, because I bet there's a number of people listening that feel stuck in that. It's like, I don't have disproportionate influence on the culture. And I use that very specifically because people, senior leadership, have disproportionate influence on the culture.
Yep.
But every person in the organization is influencing the culture. Everybody has influence on the culture. So what I would say to you, if you're in that seat where you're kind of like, gosh, I feel like I'm stuck. Like I can't put in these systems for culture. But what I would say to you is, how can you model the best of your culture? Like, how can you model that for the circle of influence you do have? One of my deep convictions, Adam, I know you believe this too, is that leadership is influence. That's a John Maxwell thing. Leadership is influence. And so we all have influence, whether we have position of authority or not. So my first, I would say, if you're in that seat, make sure that what's really important to you, your core values and convictions, there is alignment with the organization. Like if the organization just clearly doesn't value those same values, those core convictions, if there's a values misalignment, you're probably always going to be frustrated.
It's great.
Now, if there's those values might not be 100% true of the organization, but if at least there's a desire and an aspiration for those values to be true, then I would take on the mandate to say, I want to keep helping reinforce those. So here's what I would do is I would make sure I'm modeling that. I'm being consistent with what we aspire to organizationally, because clearly we're not there, but there's a desire somewhere for these things to be true. Or even your own personal values and convictions, as long as they're not out of alignment with the mission of the organization, then commit to living into those. And then secondly, what I would do is make it and this can be fun, like you can make this kind of a little game for yourself, is celebrating it in others. When I see others living into something that is good in our culture, like calling it out, so maybe you're in a meeting and somebody, shared a great idea and really, demonstrated a value of creativity or innovation, but it kind of like went flat in the meeting.
Yep.
Maybe you circle back later to that person and you say, hey, you know what? I really appreciated what you shared. I love the innovative idea there. I just appreciated your creativity in trying to help solve that problem, right? So model it yourself and then call out the best in others when you see it. And that might just be a spark that starts to help influence the culture positively. Don't be discouraged by it.
Well, friends, I hope that you were encouraged and challenged by Jenni's words. I just want to encourage you, share this episode with your team. If you have a group of friends who are leaders or whatever, share it with them. And then just have a conversation. Like, what does the culture look like on your team or your nonprofit or your business? Have a conversation. Jenni, thank you so much for speaking from the heart. I was just so grateful for that. Thanks to our partners, Vern Eide and First Interstate Bank. I'm so grateful for both of you businesses and the work that you do. Lastly, thanks to all of you who listen to the conversation each and every week. I'm just very, very grateful for you. So have a great rest of your day and God bless.